Have you ever felt like everything in your life was torn away all at once? Like the ground just vanished beneath your feet and all that's left is silence? That kind of silence that screams, "I've been there." And in that dark place where nothing made sense, I found something that changed everything. Existentialism, not as some fancy philosophy in a book, but as a raw, honest way to survive the pain. If you're going through an existential crisis, feeling a kind of emptiness no one around you seems to understand, this video is for you. Because here, we're not going to romanticize suffering. We're going to face it together. Stick with me till the end. Because maybe, just maybe, you'll find that your emptiness has a voice too, and maybe even a new beginning. There are days when the world keeps spinning, but inside you feel completely still. Everything on the outside looks normal. The traffic, the phone buzzing, the daily obligations, but something inside you has died. This is the kind of pain no one sees, the kind that doesn't bleed, but quietly devours. And the worst part? You're not even sure if you want to climb out of it anymore. It's in that invisible place that so many people get lost. Not because they're weak, but because they're exhausted from existing without meaning. There's a name for this: existential anguish. It's the same feeling that led philosophers like Sartre to see the world as an empty stage, a place where we're forced to perform without a script. And in that silent theater, we end up breaking ourselves trying to look whole. Maybe you've made it this far and you still don't know how to explain what you're feeling. You just know it hurts, and that all the usual answers, "This will pass, just think positive," they don't help anymore. They feel hollow when what you really need is something real. Something that looks suffering in the eye, no filters, no sugarcoating. Something like philosophy. Most people make a dangerous mistake at this point. They try to drown out the pain. They try to silence the abyss with noise, scrolling endlessly, chasing habits, filling every second with distraction. But what happens when the silence comes back at night? It screams. And each scream is a call to face what you've been running from. Because yes, the abyss has something to say. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "If you gaze long enough into the abyss will gaze back into you." But he also said that the one who has a why can bear almost any how. So the question is, what's your why? What's left when everything feels lost? What still beats quietly beneath the rubble? And what if this dark moment, this feeling of ending, isn't really an end at all? What if it's the beginning of something? Something no one ever told you about. Something you were meant to discover for yourself. There are moments when thinking becomes a way to breathe, when the pain tightens its grip and everything seems to fall apart. All you're left with are the questions. And that's exactly where existentialist philosophy steps in. It doesn't promise salvation. What it offers is rarer than that: clarity. It looks you straight in the eye and says, "Yes, the world is absurd. Now, what are you going to do about it?" Jean-Paul Sartre once said that humans are condemned to be free. Sounds poetic, but it's a heavy burden. It means we have no excuses, no fate written in stone. We are the authors of our existence, even when we're shattered. And that hurts, because sometimes all we want is a manual, a certainty, an escape route. But what if I told you that this lack of meaning is exactly what sets us free? That in the moment we realize nothing is fixed, a choice is born. Existentialism doesn't comfort you. It challenges you. It dares you to look at your pain like a mirror. And in that distorted reflection, you start to recognize something you didn't even know was there: your own truth. Most people make the same mistake. They wait for life to go back to how it was. But what if it doesn't? What if the fall is the new ground? That's where philosophy enters, not to hand you answers, but to help hold the weight of your questions. Because pain, when truly listened to, leaves clues. And one of those clues might be the way back to yourself. Suffering isn't an enemy to defeat, it's a territory to cross. Every bit of anguish hides a violated value, a meaning that got lost along the way. Existentialism teaches that no pain is meaningless, only unseen. And when you start to see it, really see it, something shifts, not on the outside, but inside. A quiet kind of strength begins to take root. But then the question lingers. Is that strength enough to face the absurdity of life? Or are we all just pushing the same stone up the same hill over and over like Sisyphus? What happens when you finally realize the world doesn't make sense? When no matter how hard you try to fit in, something always feels off. This is where Albert Camus reaches out with a brutal question. Is life still worth living, even when it feels absurd? His answer isn't gentle, but it's honest. Yes, it is, but not in the way you might think. Camus compared life to the myth of Sisyphus, a man condemned by the gods to push a massive stone up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down again and again, forever. It sounds tragic. But Camus ends his essay with a radical idea. We must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because the moment he accepts the absurd, he's no longer its prisoner. He becomes free. A lot of people today live like modern Sisyphus, pushing their own stone every day, a meaningless job, a life without real connection, a routine that feels hollow. And when the stone falls, they blame themselves. They think they've failed. But maybe it's not failure. Maybe it's just life being what it is, unscripted, uncertain, unpromised. The emotional pain that comes with this realization is real. It's not weakness. It's clarity. You see that no one's coming to save you. There's no automatic redemption. And in that moment, some people collapse, but others wake up. Because when everything loses its meaning, you finally have the chance to create your own. And that's revolutionary. The absurd isn't a death sentence. It's a call to authenticity, a chance to live without lies, without masks, without clinging to promises that only lead to disappointment. Life, in its raw form, can be brutal, but it can also be yours, completely, unfiltered. And what you choose to do with that freedom, that is what defines your existence. But still, can anyone really live that way? Without illusions, without guarantees, without hiding behind comfortable certainties. Living in today's world takes more than courage. It takes authenticity. But how do you stay authentic when everything around you teaches you to hide? From a young age, we learn to smile when we're sad, to please others even when we're in pain, to wear masks just to be accepted. The truth is, almost no one shows who they really are, because showing hurts, showing risks, showing exposes. Søren Kierkegaard, often called the father of Christian existentialism, called this the despair of falseness, a state where you live far from yourself, playing a role just to avoid facing the emptiness inside. But he also warned, the greatest danger is not that man might die, but that he might go on living without ever knowing himself. And that's what so many of us do. We survive, but we don't really live. Emotional pain is often the first sign that we've strayed too far from who we are. It shows up when we deny our deepest desires, when we silence the questions that make us uncomfortable. The body gets sick, the mind starts to scream, but society calls it weakness. So to avoid looking weak, we keep pretending everything's fine. But it's not, and maybe it never was. To be authentic, then, is an act of rebellion. It's looking in the mirror and saying, I'm broken, and that's still me. It's embracing your pain as part of the journey. Not something to hide, but something that reveals the truth of who you are. Authenticity doesn't heal you, but it frees you. And sometimes that freedom is more powerful than any cure. But here's the thing. Most people run from that kind of freedom. They'd rather live comfortably numb than face the brutal honesty of seeing themselves. But that choice comes with a cost, the cost of never feeling whole. Because as long as you're living a life that isn't truly yours, no success will satisfy you. No achievement will ever fill that quiet emptiness inside. And when you finally decide to be who you really are, who's going to accept you? How do you keep going when your truth scares even the people you love? There comes a quiet, lonely moment when you finally realize no one is coming to rescue you. There's no manual, no right answer. There's just you and the choice to keep going. Even with no promise that it'll get better, even with no certainty you'll make it through. Existentialism calls this moment radical responsibility. You didn't choose to suffer, but now you choose what you'll do with that pain. Sartre once said, "Man is condemned to be free," and that includes the freedom to give up or to keep going. But moving forward in existentialism doesn't mean pretending everything's fine. It means knowing it's not fine and still choosing to take one more step, not out of blind faith, but because you've decided your life is still worth living, even with scars, especially with scars. Most people wait for the pain to pass before they begin again. But what if it's the other way around? What if the beginning has to happen while it still hurts? That crack, that tiny opening of courage is where meaning starts to emerge, not as some divine revelation, but as something rising from within. A quiet commitment to your own soul, a whispered yes in the middle of the storm. Living without guarantees is like walking barefoot in the dark, but it's there, right there, that something new begins to take shape. Something yours. You stop waiting for life to give back what it took and start building something from what's left. And as harsh as that sounds, that is freedom. Not the freedom of someone who has it all, but of someone who has themselves, even in pieces. That decision changes everything, not outside, but inside. You start to speak differently, act differently, feel differently, not because you learned some new trick, but because you finally accepted the pain is part of the path. And in that honest space, the small things begin to matter again. A warm cup of coffee, a genuine look, a silence that feels safe. But what happens when the pain returns? When the darkness knocks again? How do you hold on to that choice? Pain is persistent. It comes back. It knocks on your door just when things seem to be falling into place. And what do? We try to shut it out. We numb it with distractions, with empty relationships, with food, alcohol, social media. But suffering, uncomfortable as it is, isn't here to punish you. It's here to warn you. Emotional pain doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's pointing to something that's been lost, denied, or forgotten inside you. A value betrayed, a desire silenced, a truth you've buried for too long. Existentialism invites us to listen to that pain, not to drown in it, but to understand what it's revealing. Because behind every form of suffering is a message only you can decode. We live in a culture that demonizes pain. Everything has to be fixed, fast, pretty, positive. But the soul moves at a different pace. Sometimes what we need most is silence and the courage to ask, what is this pain trying to tell me? Because yes, pain speaks. It just doesn't speak in words. It speaks in absence, in anxiety, in that weight on your chest you can't explain. And when you begin to listen, really listen, something changes. The pain stops being a monster and becomes a messenger. It points toward directions you never would have considered. It shows you what actually matters, what you need to leave behind, what you need to move toward. That's where transformation begins, not in magic, but in awareness, and awareness changes everything. But here's the warning, not everyone is ready to hear their own pain. Many choose to stay blind, because opening your eyes takes courage, courage to change, to let go, to walk a different path. But if you've made it this far, maybe you are ready. Maybe for the first time, you've allowed yourself to feel it all, so you can finally understand it all. And what if this pain, the one that's been tearing you apart, is actually the map leading you back home? What you've heard here isn't just philosophy, it's survival. The day you lose everything might feel like the end, but it could be the beginning, a return to your truth. Existentialism doesn't offer comfort, it offers courage. Courage to face the pain head-on, to listen to what it's trying to say, and to choose to keep going, even without guarantees. Maybe right now you're still deep in the chaos, but remember, every tear that falls, every scream trapped in silence, it's shaping you. You are not your pain, but your pain might be your most honest teacher, and if you truly listen, you might discover something no one ever taught you, the power to create meaning, even when everything feels lost. So now I ask you, what is your pain trying to tell you? Drop one word in the comments that captures what you're feeling right now. Let's create a space where even silence is heard and respected. If this video touched something in you, like it, share it with someone who's suffering in silence, and subscribe to the channel. Here, your pain has a voice, and your emptiness might just become light.